Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn 101. Doesn't even matter what episode it is because this video is making up for the previous 6 or 7. Those of you who are my subscribers and who watch my videos on the regular, notice that my last 6 or 7 videos, the audio is all out of sync on all of them. Now, I figured, you know what, I could make 7 or 8 new videos and spam my subscribers and really annoy them, probably lose a bunch of them because I'm spamming them. Or I could make one video with all of the jobs and just add it to my channel alongside the ones with the out of sync audio. That way, in case anybody can't deal with it, I'll just direct them here. There will be times in the description below, so you don't have to watch the whole video to find out when your job is. I know the order is a little bit skewed from the other videos, so just go to the description. You'll see the times for the different jobs there, so you don't have to watch the whole video, just the jobs that you want to see. Before I start going into this, because it's going to be a long video, let me just say that this video is in no way a breach of the non-disclosure agreement currently placed on Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. We are not allowed to use audio or video, but we are allowed to use screenshots, so that is what I will be using. So give me 1 second while I change scenes right here. There we go. All right, now I'm going to do the same intro as all the other ones. This is the action and traits window. Action and traits. Actions are the abilities for your class. Traits are the passives for your class. And job are the, well, job abilities for your class, I guess I'll say. Right now, each job only has 5, but we have seen footage of more than 5, so we'll just, get into that. Also, these screenshots were donated to me by Epical Cataclysm. He is a fellow Final Fantasy XIV player and friend, and he is supporting my channel. Thank you very much. If you ever have a YouTube channel, I will shout it out. Alright, so let's just go right into this. The first ability is Convert. Very basic. As you can see here, it's got a 3-minute recast. Costs not too much of your HP. Looks to be about 20%, because that's what the ability says. Sacrifices 20% of your maximum HP and restores 30% of MP, but you cannot kill yourself with this ability, so if you're below 20% HP, it won't work. This ability is going to be really good when used in conjunction with certain of the fire spells. It'll make it so you might be able to stay in fire form a bit longer, or once we see flare, it might make it so you can actually cast something once you've casted flare. So next ability, real quick, we want to burn through these. Freeze is a giant AoE bind. As you can see, it creates a designated area, meaning it's a placement spell, in ice, dealing ice damage with a potency of 20 and binding enemies that enter. Now it says that enter, so we can assume when it says duration of 15 seconds that it actually doesn't sit in one spot. It just binds enemies that enter it, that walk through it. I haven't actually tested the spell myself since I don't have my Black Mage at 50 or even 35 for that matter. Obviously, it's just a crowd control ability. I think that's the point we're trying to get here. It's not an ability for damage. It is just a nice AoE crowd control you can place anywhere, and that's going to be coming a lot of handy at some point. Next, you have Apocatastasis. If that's Tastasis, I can't pronounce it. It's such a bad word. Not looking that one up. Anyway, instant cast has got a recast of 2 minutes and increases a Disciple of War Magic party member's resistance to fire, ice, and lightning by 30% for 12 seconds. Cannot be reused on an individual for 1 minute, and when the effect wears off, so it's technically 72 seconds since if you count from when you first apply the ability, and you cannot cast it on yourself. So this is essentially a defensive cooldown for a party member. Say they're going to get hit by a giant fireball or a giant lightning shock or an ice pillar or something like that. You can cast this on them if it's unavoidable, and they will take 30. They theoretically will take 30% less damage since their resistances are up that high. So it's a really good team-based utility that they're giving Black Mage. They don't want Black Mage to just be this glass cannon that doesn't have to worry about anything else. You guys do have defensive cooldowns to help out your team, and I very much like that addition. Next is Mana Wall. Nullifies 2 physical attacks. Recast 2 minutes, last 60 seconds, or until you get hit twice, obviously. And this is going to be really good for not only PvP, but for any time when a Black Mage might take aggro from an ad or 2, they can take 2 physical hits. Who knows, maybe you'll even see a Black Mage take the first 2 hits on a boss because they're both physical, you know. There are a lot of things that you could probably use Mana Wall for, and it's definitely going to be super cool to see how groups decide they want to use it, or how selfishly the Black Mages decide to use it. And Flare. Now, Flare is an interesting spell. It's got a 4-second cast time. It's got a 2.5-second recast, but it costs all of your mana, so it better be pretty good. Let's find out. Deals fire damage with a potency of 260 to a target and enemies near it. That's pretty substantial considering before that, the most damaging spell you have is 200. Not to mention, you can probably use this with Astral Fire stacks, but it costs... Now, I don't know if that means it costs all of your maximum mana, like every bit, like you need 100% mana to cast it, or if it costs all of your current mana, which could mean if it's all of your current mana, that would mean that every single rotation ends in a flare, which is pretty cool. Either that, or you use it at the beginning, you convert some of your MP back, maybe use an ether, and you can go with, because this one gives you Astral Fire 3, which is interesting because, you know, you gotta have Astral Fire to get the most effectiveness out of the spell, but it gives you the full stacks. So it's kind of like we got to see how the theory craft where this belongs in your rotation. Those are all the Black Mage abilities. Hope you like those ones. I'm going to very quickly jump into the next job abilities, which is White Mage, because all my pictures are out of order. So White Mage here, let's go right started. Presence of Mind. Increases your spell speed. It's not a 5-minute recast though. And for those of you who don't know, spell speed decreases the recast time and the cast time of spells. So if you're sitting on a 2.5 second cast and recast, this will decrease both of those. So it does decrease the global cooldown for 10 seconds as well. Very, very important. Next you have Regen. Instant cast. MP costs aren't that intensive, sits on the global cooldown, and just grants a healing over time effect to a target with a cure potency of 50 for 21 seconds. Really good for somebody who maybe got hit once by an AoE that they're not going to get hit by too much, hopefully. Or maybe just to keep people topped off so while the main tank is being cured up. Even as an off heal, this is a really good ability. So definitely a useful ability to have something like that that's instant cast. Also, obviously, you're going to put on your tank, so you don't have to heal them as much. Next, you have Divine Seal. Increases your cure magic potency by 30% for 15 seconds. Can use it once every minute. So this is Divine Seal of Final Fantasy XIV, and it's way better than the Divine Seal of Final Fantasy XI, although the Final Fantasy XI one did have some interesting uses. Next you have Holy. This is like 1/7 of your mana. It looks like something like that. And it delivers a magic attack with a potency of 240 to all enemies near them and stuns them. This is definitely going to get used, by the way. But this also does not set on the global cooldown. It's got a recast at 3.5 seconds. Cast time of 3 seconds. So, it's pretty interesting to see, because that means that, like, what if your warrior brings all the adds to the mages? You can stun them for 4 seconds to give him a huge break. So it actually effectively gives your tanks more effective HP for 4 seconds, since it has the AoE stun method. So it's going to be really interesting to see when white mages decide to use this in a raid environment. And Benediction fully heals one target on a 5-minute cooldown. For those of you wondering why it doesn't heal everybody, that's what the limit break does. Can't have 2 limit breaks that heal can't have a limit break and an ability that heals everybody. But this is your, oh shit, he's at 100 HP, let me heal the tank back up to full button. Or, you know, even use it on somebody who's maybe taking some other sort of intensive damage attack. But anyway, that's all for White Mage. So, you know, give it a few seconds and we'll move on to the next job. So I have a good timer. Next we have Monk. See, I'm just winging them because the screenshots are all out of order. And let's just jump right into it. Rock Breaker is the first ability. It's got 120 TP cost, sits on a global cooldown, and it does cast instantly. It is a melee ability, so you know. And it delivers an attack with a potency of 130 to all enemies in a cone before you. So this is essentially an AoE move, which is interesting that that's their first ability. It says duration of 18 seconds, which is interesting. Does that mean that Rock Breaker lasts 18 seconds? Or is there something else that's here that we're not really seeing? It says it can only be used in Corel form. So, I don't know. I guess I'll have to test it out a little bit, because that's interesting that 18-second duration is kind of just sitting there. Maybe it's supposed to, oh, I think it's supposed to be at the end. Oh, no, it's not. Never mind. So it also changes your form to Oppo Oppo, so you have to use it in Corel form. That means it's one of your finishers. And it also grants you Grease Lightning, which is pretty cool. That means that if you're ending a combo in, how should I say? If you're ending a combo to try and get Grease Lightning stacks, you now have the option to do a single target or an AoE, which is very, very good, because it means that you have a lot more versatility in your build. You're not pigeonholed into one finisher every time. And the Grease Lightning stacks, for those of you who don't know, increases your damage dealt by 7% and attack speed by 5%. You can stack it up to 3 times at max level, so it's definitely a really important ability. Next, we have Shoulder Tackle. Shoulder Tackle rushes to a target and delivers an attack with a potency of 100. Not so bad. Sits on a 1.5-minute cooldown, though. Must be more than 10 yalms from the target to execute, so it's a gap closer, essentially. But it also stuns for 2 seconds. You just can't execute it while you're bound. Very simple ability, very useful. Fist of Fire increases your damage dealt by 10%. Cannot be used with Fist of Earth or Fist of Wind, and shares a recast timer with both of them. That just means that you get to choose one of 3 fist abilities, and this is going to be the one that you'll use most of the time, since it's just a straight damage increase. It's a really good damage increase. That 10% is nothing to scoff at, considering how many other damage boosting attacks monks get. You're gonna have to manage all of them. Have fun with that. Next, you have one 11-meter punch. I'm gonna call it 1-inch punch, because that's what, you know, most punches that look like this, they're 1-inch punch. You know, Bruce Lee or something. I don't know. Delivers an attack with a potency of 80, can only be used when in raptor form, and removes one beneficial status from the target. So if they have a buff on them, like Berserk or a boost attack that maybe increases their attack damage, this will lower it. Also, if you're in PvPing, you can knock off Protect and things like that. Really useful ability. You have to be in raptor form to use it though, so it's not like you can just spam it. And it changes you to Corel form. So pretty good utility on that. Not so much great damage, but there are going to be a lot of people who find good uses for that since it has a dispelling effect. And finally, we have Dragon Kick. Delivers an attack with a potency of 100, 150 when delivered from the target's flank, which is their sides, by the way. Some people think that a flank is any like way behind them. It actually means on the side. So, you know, I'm sure that's a term that some people know. I actually never cared to find out until this game. If you're in Opal form, it reduces a target's blunt resistance by 10%. So this is actually an opener if you're in Opal form, which you can only do after technically finishing your combo. So you have to go through your combo once and then come back to Dragon Kick for it to be most effective. It reduces their blunt resistance by 10%, which essentially increases all of the monks in your party's damage, since I don't really know anybody else who does blunt damage yet. Maybe some of the summons will, though. And it changes your form to Raptor. So those are the monk abilities. I really like what they did with these. They made each of your forms a bit more desirable in a certain way, and they gave them a lot of utility and a lot more options in terms of their abilities. Obviously, these aren't all of them, and I can't wait to see the rest of them. So let's move on to the next job. And the mystery job is Dragoon. Awesome. Dragoon I really liked because their kit entirely focuses on jump abilities, and each jump ability has its own unique use. One of the better designed jobs, I think, right up there with Monk, honestly. Now, Jump delivers a jumping attack with a potency of 180. That's really strong, by the way, but it sits on a 1-minute cooldown, so this isn't something you'll be spamming. But it returns you to the original position from where you attacked, so it's mostly a ranged attack. You can't do it when bound, however, so remember that. But it is a ranged attack. Maybe if you need to hit something from far away, but you really need to be in the same position. I really like that it has that utility to it, because the next ability, Elusive Jump, just jumps 15 yalms behind you, which is really far, by the way, while removing any heavier bind effects. This essentially means you could jump back to get rid of a heavier bind effect, then jump, and then, as you can see with your next ability, this also reduces enmity, by the way, which means that if you're about to get aggro, you can save yourself. And that also comes with the next ability, Spine Shattered Jump. It's got a range of 20 yalms and delivers a jumping attack with a potency of 170. This, however, jumps to the target, which means that when you jump, that means that if you use Elusive Jump, you can jump backwards, get rid of heavier bind effects, use a jump to do damage from a distance, and then Spine Shatter dive onto them to close the gap, which is really cool. If you have all those cooldowns up at the same time, obviously, because this sits on a 3-minute cooldown. This also stuns for 2 seconds, though, so that's pretty cool. Next, you have Power Surge, which increases the damage dealt from a single jump or Spine Shatter dive by 50%. Also on a 3-minute cooldown, just increases the damage you do with your next jump. Obviously, if you are using it for pure damage and jump is up, jump is the better damage increase. But Spine Shatter dive is not bad because it's a gap closer. You know, you can't ever underestimate doing more damage on your gap closers. And Dragon Fire Dive. Now, this is an interesting one. Does a fire-based attack with a potency of 250 to all nearby enemies. That is a massive AoE damage burst. It's 5 minutes, and that's a lot of AoE damage. Cannot be executed while bound. And also, keep in mind that the Black Mage ability that reduces the fire resistance, this does more damage because of it. This is one of those exceptions to the melee damage dealers that will get a damage boost from Foe's Requiem, actually, I believe it was. Yeah, Foe's Requiem. But we'll get into that once we get to Bard. That's only if you've seen my other videos. And speaking of which, I think the next one might actually be Bard. Would you look at that? I actually guessed it right that time. So the first ability that Bard has is called Mage's Ballad, which refreshes. Now, this is going to be interesting because a lot of people aren't so thrilled about the idea of a support DPS class coming from Archer. A lot of people just wanted a ranged DPS class, so this is going to be interesting to see how people react to this. Mage's Ballad is their first song. Now remember, Bard gets songs, and the way the songs work in this game aren't exactly the same, but I'll go through that as I discuss the ability. Refreshes MP of all nearby party members while lowering your own damage dealt by 20%. A little bit ambiguous if you were expecting it to work a certain way. MP is drained while singing. Now, what does that mean? Now, the way that Bard works now is you use an ability, you use one of your songs, and you don't just hit the nearby people. It's not like, okay, you were in range when I casted it, you get the effect, I can move on. It's you cast a song and you sing it constantly while you're DPSing, while you're using all your normal abilities. And what happens is you pulsate out in a 20 yalm range anybody in that range in your party or raid will get the bonus effect. Even if they walk out of it and then come back into it, they will regain the effect from walking out of the distance. And that's pretty much the same for all the effects. As you can see, it says will be lost if party members move out of hearing distance. You can also automatically end it by reusing the ability, and you can only use one song at a time. That's going to stay static, so I'm not going to repeat any of that for the next songs. Next, you have Foe's Requiem, which I was just talking about for Dragonfire Dive. Reduces all enemy resistances by 10%. Elemental resistances, so anything that does elemental base damage, fire damage. There we go, I'm back. That was like, what, a 10-second delay? I don't know what takes it so long. It's because there's no sound coming out of the earphones. It's a little weird. But anyway, as I was saying, this reduces all enemy elementals resistance by 10%. That sentence was terrible, but I already said it once before, so you already know. And all the other effects are the same. It just helps you deal more damage, and it pulsates on all enemies in an area, so it really helps Dragonfire Dive and AoEs a lot. Next, we have Army's Paeon. Refreshes TP of all nearby party members while lowering your own damage dealt by 20%. So this is more of a, okay, we need some, everyone's kind of running low on TP. Bard casts Army's Paeon, everyone get their TP back so we can really keep doing damage without much delay. Really big raid-wide damage increase. Very good supportability, and obviously the rest of the effects are the same in terms of how songs operate. Finally, we have Reigns of Death. I don't know why I said finally, because there's one more ability after this. But anyway, delivers an attack with a potency of 100 to a target and all enemies near it. Now, this is very interesting. This is a very expensive TP cost of 200, and it's got about an average AoE damage. 100 is a normal rate for something that can be spammed essentially. And but this lowers the target's damage dealt by 10% while increasing their damage taken by 10%. That makes it a crazy excellent. Don't know why I would even put those two words together. Supportability. Now, keep in mind, it still does do AoE damage, and it does about normal AoE damage at that, although it's a very expensive TP cost because of the supportability. And that's crazy. That means that means your tanks are taking 10% less damage. Everybody's taking 10% less damage by anything that got hit by this. But also, the enemy is taking more damage, which means that this is a raid-wide buff to damage and debuff to the enemy. That's a great utility, and I'm really glad that they gave them something like that in their weapon skills. And that lasts 20 seconds, so you don't have to spam this by any means. And also, it has a 15% chance your next quick knock will cost no TP. That's pretty good considering that Wide Volley has a chance to make this cost no TP. So it's kind of like an AoE rotation almost. I guess Wide Volley would be your go-to AoE, and then if you get the proc here, you'd use that, and then if you get the proc here, you'd go on to the next one. So it's pretty interesting to see how procs work with Bard in their DPS rotations, especially because they have a lot of AoE damage if you've looked at their class abilities. Now, next, finally, we have, now it's finally for real, Battle Voice, which is a 5-minute recast, and it doubles the effectiveness of all songs for 30 seconds, other than Swift Song, which is an archer ability. So, this is just a nice way of boosting your other abilities. I'm sure there'll be a great use for this in raids, because there are definitely going to be times when you need to do a crap ton of mana regenning or TP regenning. I very much doubt people will use it with Foe's Requiem unless they have a ton of TP and mana already and they really want to burn the boss down if they are very Black Mage heavy, things like that. But that's all the Bard abilities for the time being. So give it a few seconds and then I will jump into the next one. You want to guess what the next one is? I have a feeling Warrior, which is the first one I did, will be last. So the next one should be Paladin. That is right. That was the last one. That was the worst laugh. Pretend I didn't do that. And Paladin's very interesting. I didn't expect some of these abilities to be the way they are. I don't know. I didn't know what to expect with the Paladin, though, I guess. But based on 1.0, I guess I didn't expect this. This was also Epical Cataclysm. Thank you for the pictures right here. So as you can see, they have 5 abilities like anybody else. And the first one is called Sword Oath. Excuse me. Costs 266 MP out of 1500, by the way, which is not a lot. Also, how level is he? He's 50. Wow. Okay. And it's got 266 MP cost. It sits on the global cooldown. Instant cast. Increases the potency of your auto attacks by 25. Now, I am not exactly sure what the point of that is. I know it generates more enmity per auto attack, which is cool. It cannot be used with Shield Oath, which is the ability I think as a tank is just better. Maybe this is for soloing, who knows? Because it would help a Paladin solo a lot better, that's for sure. Next, they have Cover, which sits on a 2-minute cooldown, and it takes all physical damage, only physical, intended for another party member Can only be used if the member is closer than 6 yalms, and it lasts for 12 seconds. So this is pretty good. It's what cover is expected to do pretty much, and it's really good if somebody takes aggro and you really want to protect them. You'll take all the physical damage for them. Really good. I really like that. It would especially protect mages against adds if they're close enough and things like that. Next we have Shield Oath, which I think is the better Oath ability, and it reduces all damage received by 25% while lowering your damage dealt by 30% and increasing enmity. This is essentially equivalent to one of the Warrior's abilities on most levels. And in a party situation, I just can't see anybody using anything but this, since Paladins aren't really damage dealers. And it's definitely a very, very good tanking ability that you get at level 40 too, so that's pretty cool. Next, Final Fantasy XI fans will be happy to see this. Spirits Within its back. It sits on a 30-second recast. Deals an attack potency of 300. So this doesn't sit on the global cooldown. You can use this once every 30 seconds. But just like in Final Fantasy XI, the less HP you have, the less potency it does. So we can assume that every 10% of HP you're missing, for every 1% of HP missing, it does 1% less potency. That's a very nice assumption to make. It also silences for a second, so it's a nice interrupt spell if an enemy is casting a spell. Next we have Hollowed Ground. Renders you impervious to most attacks. It sits on a very awkward cooldown of 7 minutes, but most attacks, I don't know what that means, and it lasts 10 seconds, so invincible, I guess. I just don't know what most attacks means. I guess we'll have to find out about that a little bit later after I've done some testing. From what I understand, though, I haven't found a Paladin who hasn't been hurt by, has found an ability that pierces this yet. So that's all the Paladin abilities. I really like these, especially the Sword and Shield Oath, although I think Sword Oath could be significantly better. I feel like I need to post feedback on that being better. I don't know. Potency of auto attacks going up by 25 is actually a lot. Because that means that each auto attack will do at least 25 extra damage. That's not really how it's scaled, but that's somewhat how it works. But anyway, let's be done with Paladin. Let's move on to the final job that I will talk about. The first job video I actually did, and that's Warrior. And I'm standing in a much different place, as you can see from any of the previous pictures, including the ones my friend sent me. And I really like the Warrior job. I feel like it's got a lot of niche things to it that make it unique from the other jobs, especially considering it's a very damage-centric tank. They have a lot more HP than Paladins do, but they take a lot more damage innately. But they have a lot of different ways of mitigating that damage and getting their health back. So it's very interesting to see how these abilities work. So Defiance is the first one. Sits on a 10-second recast, which doesn't really matter because it's essentially an infinite buff as long as you remain in a zone. If you zone, this buff will wear off. Increases your maximum HP by 25% while lowering your damage dealt by 35% and increasing enmity. Like I said, very similar to Shield Oath, and the effect also ends upon reuse. When you use certain actions under Defiance, you'll gain a stack of Wrath, which increases your critical hit rate by 2%, stacking up to 5 maximum. So you can get up to a 10% crit rate increase, which does help your enmity a lot also, and your damage. When all 5 units are stacked, you become Infuriated, which allows you the exclusive use of certain abilities, which we'll go into because all of the job abilities here do use the Infuriated status. Let's jump right into Inner Beast. Inner Beast delivers an attack with a potency of 260, ignores the 35% damage penalty inflicted by Defiance. Most of the job abilities do, so that way Defiance's damage doesn't really affect your Infuriated status. It's your way of completely going past Defiance. It can only be executed when infuriated, and you will lose all stacks of Wrath. That's pretty much static across the rest of the abilities we're going to talk about also. But this also absorbs HP. It doesn't say how much, and it doesn't say it's a percentage, so I'm assuming it's a somewhat ranged. I'm sure it's not static, but that it's not exactly based on anything either. So it's a static range, like between a certain amount, but we'll see how that works when I get a little more time to test it. Unfortunately, the max dungeon was level 34, so I couldn't test it in a dungeon environment. Unchained is next ability, 5-minute recast, and it nullifies the damage penalty inflicted by Defiance. This is for all of your abilities, though, which is really good, because that means that if you don't really need to focus on the tanking or any of the other ones that use your Wrath stacks, your Infuriated status, this is just an overall DPS increase, and it's also a really nice enmity increase over the course of 20 seconds. The effective cancels Defiance ends, nothing really special about that. Let's move on to the next ability. Next is Steel Cyclone, an ability that was very popular in 1.0. Might still be popular, but not as popular, I feel like. It's a giant, super strong AoE. It does 200 potency, which is a lot. It's very similar to Dragonfire Dive, except that Dragonfire Dive has a much longer cooldown and will probably be used a lot less than Steel Cyclone. This ignores the 35% damage penalty inflicted by Defiance, which is pretty standard across most of the damaging abilities of Warrior. And it can only be executed when infuriated, so there's nothing really special. It's just a really strong AoE. It's really good for gaining aggro in AoE situations, especially when you combine it with our next ability, Infuriate gives you 5 stacks of Wrath, instantly infuriating you. So you get 5 stacks instantly, sits on a 3-minute cooldown, so it's not too long. And a lot of your other abilities, your enmity generating abilities, also increase your Wrath stack. So it's very cool to see how the warrior abilities all work together. This Wrath stack thing is going to cause it's another source of another resource management. You have to be able to stack them, know when they're stacked, and use them. It's really cool. I really like the way they did warrior, and I can't wait to see some really good warriors show paladins how to tank, you know? Anyway, those are all the job abilities. I actually got through them way quicker than I thought. This headset didn't die twice yet. Anyway, if you like this video, please like, favorite, subscribe, and share, especially if you have a friend who wants to know everything about all the jobs in Final Fantasy XIV, what they currently offer, how they'll probably play out, and you know, I just really enjoyed doing this video. All 7 jobs at once was really cool. Apologies for the previous videos that had the audio out of sync. So you know, that's it. I'm just gonna end it here. Check out my Facebook though at www.facebook.com/MrHappy1227, where you can go and request videos. Can't really get much better than that. Man, I really wonder when he's going to do a video about this. Well, ask me, and the more people I ask, the more likely I am to do it sooner. So thank you for watching. Hope this makes up for the audio being out of sync on all the other videos. And thank you guys, because I'm going to have more content coming in the coming days.